The lights went out for a second, and when they came back on, she was there. She hadn't been there before, I know that. The carriage had been empty when I sat down, but now she was sitting at the far end. Her head lowered, hands folded in her lap. When she finally lifted her face, there was nothing where her eyes should have been. Just two dark, wet hollows. The clock at Bank Station didn't tick, it pulsed, a rhythmic thrum that matched the heavy, humid air of the London Underground. It was 12:17 a.m. I stood alone on the Northern Line's southbound platform, the tiles sweating a thin film of grime that caught the harsh, flickering fluorescent light. I was a man of routines, and this was the ghost train, the final service before the gates groaned shut and the darkness claimed the tunnels. When the train finally emerged from the throat of the tunnel, it didn't screech. It sighed. The silver doors slid open with a sound like a silk shroud being dragged over gravel. I stepped into carriage 4. It was empty, save for the smell, a cloying mixture of ozone, wet copper, and something sweet like rotting lilies. I sat down, my reflection in the dark window opposite me, looking hollowed out, eyes like bruised thumbprints. As the train lurched forward, the lights flickered and died for a heartbeat. When they snapped back on, I wasn't alone. At the far end of the carriage sat a woman in a heavy wool coat, despite the stifling heat. She hadn't been there a second before. She was staring at her lap. Her hands were folded, but they were wrong. The fingers too long, the skin the color of a drowned moon.
"Who are you?"
I asked, my voice sounding thin in the vacuum of the carriage. The woman didn't look up. She didn't move a muscle. I frowned, waiting for an answer that didn't come. A cold knot tightened in my stomach. We should have reached London Bridge by now. We should have felt the brakes bite, but the train didn't slow down. It kept going, accelerating deeper into the dark. I looked at the tunnel walls rushing past outside. They were no longer brick and cable. They were smooth, organic, glistening with a dark, oily substance. The familiar sound of the tracks had transformed into a frantic heartbeat.
"Home is behind us,"
she whispered finally. Her voice didn't come from her throat. It seemed to vibrate out of the very floorboards beneath our feet. "We're going down now." I stood up to reach for the emergency alarm, but as I moved, the carriage stretched. The row of seats between me and the alarm grew longer, the linoleum floor rippling like water. The woman finally looked up. She had no eyes. Only two deep, weeping gashes that bled shadows onto her cheeks. "The fare must be paid," she said. Panic, cold and sharp, pierced my chest. I ran toward the connecting door to carriage 3, but when I burst through, I found myself back in carriage 4. The woman was there, now 3 rows closer. I turned and ran the other way, through the doors to carriage 5. Again, the same carriage, the same woman, 2 rows closer. The train began to tilt downward at an impossible angle. I gripped a yellow pole, but the metal felt warm and soft, like bone covered in velvet. I looked out the window. We weren't in a tunnel anymore. We were descending through a vast subterranean cathedral of rib cages. Colossal white arches of bone stretched into an infinite black void, lit only by the rhythmic orange glow of the train's internal lights.
"Where are we?"
I screamed, my voice breaking. "The deep line," the woman said. She was standing now, her coat fluttering in a wind that shouldn't exist. "The line for those who forgot to get off. The line for the weary who just wanted to close their eyes." I remembered then. The long day at the office, the crushing fatigue, the moment I sat down on the platform bench at bank and felt my chin drop to my chest. I remembered the coldness creeping up my legs. I looked down at my own hands. They were fading, turning translucent, the veins beneath the skin glowing with the same sickly orange light as the train. The train screamed as it braked. The doors hissed open. Outside wasn't a station. It was a shore, a vast black sea of ink stretched out under a sky of stone. Thousands of figures stood on the platform, their faces blank, their bodies shimmering like heat haze. They were all waiting to board. "This is your stop," the woman said, her hand resting on my shoulder. I tried to pull back, but my feet moved of their own accord. I stepped onto the platform. The air smelled like wet stone and silence. As the train doors began to close, I saw my own reflection in the glass one last time. It wasn't hollow anymore. It was slowly fading away. The train slid back into the throat of the dark, leaving me on the platform. I looked at the person next to me, a man in a suit clutching a briefcase. "Is this the way to Morden?" the man asked, his voice trembling. I felt my jaw tighten, my own identity slipping away like sand through a sieve. I looked at my hands, now long and pale, the skin the color of a drowned moon. "Home is behind us," I heard myself say, my voice vibrating from the floorboards beneath their feet. "We're going down now." Suddenly, the screeching sound stopped. The shaking ceased. I jolted awake, my head snapping up. The carriage was normal. The walls were metal and plastic. The floor was solid linoleum. The woman was gone. The carriage was completely empty, just as it had been when I first got on. The automated announcement played, calm and clear. "This is Morden. This train terminates here. Please take all your belongings with you." The doors hissed open with a mechanical sigh. My heart was hammering in my chest, sweat sticking my shirt to my back. It had just been a dream, a nightmare brought on by exhaustion. I stood up on shaky legs and walked out onto the platform. The air was cool and smelled of clean disinfectant. I took a deep breath, trying to shake the feeling of cold and darkness. Then I froze. Standing right next to the exit, waiting patiently in the dim light, was a woman in a heavy wool coat. She was staring at her lap. Her hands were folded, and even from a distance, I could see they were wrong. The fingers too long, the skin the color of a drowned moon. Slowly, she turned her head towards me. She didn't have eyes, just dark, weeping holes, but I knew she was looking right at me. And then she whispered, her voice vibrating through the very soles of my shoes. "See you tomorrow night."